One missing logger, 6 witnesses who never changed their story, and a mystery that has divided believers and skeptics for more than 50 years.
Pretty scary.
Welcome to Pretty Scary, where each week I'll be slipping into the darker side of things, dissecting a horror film, probing a true crime documentary, or lingering on real stories from real people who have experienced something pretty scary. But it's not just me, I want to hear from you too. The eerie, the unexplained, the moments that made your stomach drop and stayed with you long after. So if you've experienced something strange or you know a story that we should definitely explore, then send it my way. Email me boo@prettyscary.com and follow along on socials at prettyscarypod. And if you want the full experience, you can watch every episode over on YouTube. Just search for Pretty Scary. We are back with part 2 on the story of Travis Walton, an alien abduction with 6 witnesses who never changed their story, and a mystery that has divided believers and skeptics for more than 50 years.
Previously on Pretty Scary.
And as they were driving through this road, through the dark woodland, they noticed a light coming through the trees. So Mike left the access road that they were on and took a road heading towards the light. They see what they described as a disc-shaped craft. Travis immediately jumps out of the truck and he just starts walking towards this thing. A huge, insanely bright beam of light came down from the disc and hit Travis like a lightning bolt. It lifted him up off the ground and threw him about 20 odd feet into the woods. Mike Rogers puts his foot down, reverses out of that clearing, away from that thing, and leaves Travis behind. So, the police organised a large search party to go back into the woods where the men had been. The town of Snowflake began to turn on Mike and the other crew members, convinced that these guys were lying and covering up the truth. But on the night of the 10th of November, a collect call was made to Travis Walton's sister. The phone in Travis's sister's kitchen rang and her husband Grant picked it up. And when Grant really concentrated and started to listen, and he asked over and over again, "Who is this? Who is this?" the voice said clear as day, "It's me, Travis." Travis's sister's husband, Grant, immediately recognised Travis's voice and he asked where the hell he was. He managed to make out the area that Travis was describing and he jumped straight in his car to go and find him. On the way, Grant went to Travis's brother's house. He picked him up and he told him that Travis had called him and that they were going to go and get him. Travis described waking up on a road. It was dark and it was raining. He had no idea where he was or how he had got there. There was a light above him, and as he looked up, he recognised it to be that same hovering disc that he had seen before. He said it was there for a second and then flew off into the sky. Left alone on this road, Travis described looking around, trying to figure out where he was, but that he felt so groggy and weak and he could hardly move. He seemed to be in the middle of nowhere. He stood up, his legs were like jelly, but he knew that he had to start walking and he had to try and find some help. Travis was extremely dehydrated and he said that he needed water more than he'd ever needed anything. He felt like he would die if he didn't get a drink and get some help. He didn't know what was wrong with him or what was going on. So, Travis staggers down this road until eventually he comes to a service station. And the service station has got a payphone. As he gets closer, he does recognise where he is. And that's when he picks up the phone and he calls his sister's house. When Travis's brother and brother-in-law get to him, they begin to bombard barred him with questions about where he has been all this time. But Travis is so weak and so confused that he can't even think enough to answer them. But he did ask, "What do you mean all this time?" Travis had no idea that he had been missing for 5 days. He said that one minute he was looking up at this thing in the woods, and then the next minute he was on the road outside. Travis's brother just stared at him. He was so shocked that Travis not only didn't have an explanation for where he'd been, but he didn't even know he had been missing. His brother started to try and say to him over and over again, "Travis, what do you mean? You've been gone for 5 days. 5 days, Travis. Where have you been? You must know." And he was so frustrated with Travis because how could he not know? This just wasn't making any sense. Later on, Travis said that hearing he'd been missing for 5 days put him into complete shock that night. He went into almost a catatonic state and he stopped replying to his brother and his brother-in-law altogether. He just sat there, staring, while the two men tried to make sense of this. And with Travis not communicating at all now, his brother decided that before they call the police, they should take Travis to hospital and just have him checked over. So that's what they do. They get Travis into Grant's car and the three of them head straight to the hospital. Now, bear in mind that at this point, Travis's disappearance is big news. His face has been all over newspapers and TV. And so the first thing that Travis's brother does is go in and ask the doctor to please not let anyone know that they had seen Travis. Give him time to recuperate before he had to deal with all of that. The doctor, of course, agreed, and then he carried out some examinations on Travis, and he said that apart from being malnourished, dehydrated, the fact that he looked a bit tired and quite ill, that there were no physical injuries on Travis that he could see, except for one tiny incision hole on Travis's arm, which looked like it came from a needle. Now, the doctor did question this, if it had come from drug use, but Travis was not a drug user and he denied this to the doctor, and his brother and his brother-in-law agreed. The hospital ran blood tests anyway, just to be sure that nothing was found in Travis's system. And of course, it wasn't. Travis was given the all clear and told to go home. When they left the hospital, Travis's brother took Travis back to his house, and by the time they arrived there were already a couple of journalists, but they managed to ignore them and sneak by and get in the house. But the phone was ringing off the hook the whole night. The word had gotten out that Travis was back. Now, just to note here, it actually wasn't the doctor who had been the one to out this information, but what had happened was, when Travis had made the collect call to his sister's house, the operator recognised his name and alerted the press. That's how big this story was. Sheriff Gillespie managed to get a hold of one of Travis's family members that night, and he told them that he needed to be told exactly where Travis was and that he needed to speak to him immediately. Travis's brother called Sheriff Gillespie back and agreed to let him head over to his house and see him that night. Gillespie arrived there around 11 p.m. and he sat down with Travis to finally and hopefully get some answers. Sheriff Gillespie would say that Travis was very clearly in shock that night. From his many years as a police officer, he was able to recognise this almost immediately. This man had been through something traumatic. Gillespie pushes on though, and Travis does do his best that night to speak to the sheriff. Travis tells him that he remembers the night that he finished work. He remembers getting out the truck. He remembers the bright light. But that is it. After that, the next thing he can tell Gillespie is when he woke up on the road that very same evening. Sheriff Gillespie eventually leaves. He's disappointed, to be honest, to not have had any answers from Travis, but he tells him that he'll be in touch. The next morning, Travis wakes up and there is tons of media outside his brother's house. And over days and days, they never really leave. A newspaper in America called the National Enquirer got in touch with Travis's brother. They told him that they knew Travis was being hounded and that if Travis agreed to speak to them and give them exclusivity to this story, that they would put him and his brother up in a hotel. They would keep him away from the media and they would also pay for Travis to have some private tests done so that he could have some answers on what had happened to him. Travis agreed. It was a few more days until Travis sat down with the National Enquirer, and in that time, Travis had been having some flashbacks. He'd also been having some dreams as well, and he sat with all these thoughts and memories, and he really tried his best to remember what had happened in the days where he had been missing. And so, when Travis sat down with the National Enquirer, he had managed to remember some of these details. And this is what Travis Walton told them. He remembered waking up the morning of November 5th. He went to Mike's house and he got in the truck with the rest of the crew, and he remembered the day's work in Sitgreaves National Forest. He remembered heading home at the very end of that long day, and he remembered seeing the light and the guys all chatting about it. He knew he had got out the truck, and he knew that he had headed towards this huge floating disc in the sky. He said that he stood there under this disc and he was amazed by the intricate details on it. He knew that there was a big flash of light, and then he could recall hearing his friends screaming his name. Now this is the bit that up until this point nobody had heard before. Travis then said that he woke up on a table and what he thought was a doctor standing over him. He looked around and he could see lights and wires. He looked down at his chest and describes what he thought was a large box on top of him. The doctor, who was dressed in white and wearing a face mask, was fiddling around with this box on Travis's chest. He said that he knew he was drifting in and out of consciousness because he remembered that he kept waking up. He assumed that he was in a hospital and that whatever that bright light was had injured him. So, as he's drifting in and out of consciousness, feeling foggy, his vision's blurry, he eventually starts to come around properly. He starts to see things a little clearer. He becomes more aware of what he is seeing. He concentrates his vision and he looks at this doctor. The doctor looks back at Travis and he leans in close to him. And when he does this, Travis is horrified. Travis describes his face as long, thin, and grey, and he's got these small slits for eyes. Travis is just filled with fear. He's got no idea what he is looking at. He tries to sit up at this point. He pushes the doctor away. He pushes the wires and the cords away from him, and he manages to slide off the table. He stands up in what he describes as a tiny room, and he realises that there are 3 of these barely human beings standing around this table. He grabs some sort of instrument that had fallen on the floor in the commotion, and Travis says that he had no idea what it was, but it was big and it looked heavy, and so he just grabbed it. He starts to wave this thing around and threaten these doctors that if they don't leave him alone, he's going to batter them. And these 3 things begin to back away. They turn and they just leave the room. And then Travis said that he was just stood there alone watching them. He said that they left the room and they walked down the hallway outside the door. He knew in his mind that he had to try and get out of there before they came back. He left and he went down the same hall in the opposite direction. He came to another room with a chair in it. He went inside this room and he starts to frantically sort of look around for another door or a window or just something that he could escape from. As he's doing this, he turns around and there's a man standing in the doorway, a normal human man. He was wearing a suit, a full body hazmat suit, and he had a hood up and he had a visor over his face. But Travis is so relieved to see this guy that he runs up towards him and he begs him to help him. He's asking him, "Where are we? What is this place? Can you help me get out of here?" And Travis said that although he was frantically asking these questions to this man and begging him for help, that this man didn't react at all. He barely even made eye contact with Travis, like he wasn't really focusing on anything. Travis said that just something was just off. And then the guy grabs Travis's arm and he starts to lead him out of the room, and they pass by the first room that Travis was in and they continue on down this hallway. And Travis is saying, "Thank you, oh my God, thank you so much." He's saying this over and over again, convinced that this man is helping him. This man is going to get him out of here. Now, the guy does not say a word to Travis, but he leads him into another room, out a door, down some stairs, and out another door. When they get out through that second door, Travis described it as a huge airplane hangar, like you would see in a military base or an airport. He said that there were crafts, just like the one he had saw that night in the woods. The man in the suit leads him through this hangar, all while Travis is asking question after question, but the man says nothing. Eventually, they get to the far end of this place, and the man in the suit opens another door, which leads to this bright white room, and there are 3 other men in these same suits. They're all stood around a table, and Travis and the man walk towards them, and they all put their arms out to take hold of Travis. Instinctively, Travis pulls away, but then the men grab him and they force him down onto the table. Travis tries his best to resist and he pushes against them and he hits out, but he can't get up and he can't get away from them. He said that he remembers one of them grabbing for a face mask and putting it over Travis's mouth and nose, and then he blacks out. The next time Travis remembers waking up, he is on the road, outside, in the rain. He looks up and he watches that craft fly away. And when it's out of sight, that is when Travis gets up and walks to that payphone and calls his sister. During this time, between Travis returning home and doing this interview with the National Enquirer, his life had become so different. Travis was famous. Everybody wanted to talk to him. Everybody wanted to hear his story. He was in and out of the police station for interviews, having medical checkups. He was so busy and distracted that it took a few weeks before he was able to meet up with Mike and the rest of the logging crew who were there that night. One night, they eventually managed to meet. They all got together at Mike Rogers' house and they sat down and they finally all talked about what had happened. Now, the same as everybody else, the crew were just full of questions for Travis and he answered them all as best as he could. Every one of those men believed everything that Travis had told them about his experience because they were there. They saw the craft as well that night. They saw the beam of light and they saw Travis being blasted away by it. The 7 men sat together that night for hours and hours, going over every detail. The men finally managed to tell Travis that they all felt incredibly guilty for driving off and leaving him, that they didn't try harder to get him back in the truck. The 7 men also spent a lot of time talking about people. The people who had heard this story, the people in the town, the people all over the world who they knew had heard what happened to them that night. And they especially talked about the many, many people that they knew didn't believe them. After that reunion at Mike's house, the men all went their separate ways and they didn't really stay in touch. It was almost as though they just needed clarity on the events of that night. They needed to say it out loud to each other And then they needed to move on. In all the years that have passed since this incident happened, some of the men who were on the crew that night have given interviews to the media. Ken Peterson, the level-headed one of the group, the one who made the initial phone call to police that night, he gave a very emotional interview many, many years later. He said that he still has nightmares about that night, that he still has bad days where it's all he can think about, and that some nights, when he's had trouble sleeping, he actually gets scared to look out of his windows in case he sees lights or some sort of craft. Ken said that that night ruined his life. He can't handle the amount of people who think he's a liar, the people who think he's some kind of kook. Another one of the men in the crew also gave an interview, again many years later, and he said that his wife actually left him a few years after the abduction of Travis because he had become so obsessed with what he saw that night, and she did not believe a word he was saying, and ultimately they would just constantly argue about it. He also said that a lot of his friends and family distanced themselves from him because they were so embarrassed that he was continuing to stand by this hoax. This story, the abduction of Travis Walton, is one of the most famous and known as one of the most believed stories of alien abduction ever. But of course, there are a lot of people who don't believe Travis or the crew at all, which is fine, but can you imagine being one of those men? Taking polygraph tests, being interviewed by the police, never being proved to be lying, but still constantly being called a liar for years? It must be so frustrating. If you believe that they're telling the truth, that is. 40 plus years have passed since that night. And in that time, there have been 16 lie detector tests done on all these men who were there. They have all passed every time, and their story has never changed. Even that one member of the crew, whose test came back as inconclusive on the very first test, remember? He was later retested by the same examiner with the exact same questions that were asked that day, and he passed. So, what are we saying? Is this the most believed alien abduction story because it's true? There are loads of stories of alien encounters, ghosts, lots of things that can't be explained, and I think the only way to enjoy those stories is to be open to them being true. So where do you sit on this? Do you believe Travis's story? I mean, it was backed up by 6 other men. Does that not nudge you in the direction of something must have happened? Do you have another alien encounter story that you've heard that you believe? Or are you a total skeptic? Do you think all 7 of these men are lying? Or are you like me and land somewhere in the middle? Well, I want to know. So email me, boo@prettyscary.com, and follow along and message on socials at prettyscarypod. In just a moment, I'm going to deep dive into a film that if you love that story of UFOs, you will love this.
Pretty scary.
So the movie recommendation for this week is called Fire in the Sky. This is actually based on Travis Walton's story. A few weeks ago, I was talking on my Instagram account about watching alien abduction films, and a lot of you guys who follow me on Instagram replied with this movie recommendation, which I was very happy to see. So basically, it does tell the story of the logging crew and what had happened that night. The interesting part of this story, though, is that while Travis is missing, we actually get to see what happened to Mike and Ken and the other guys, the pressure they were under and the reaction that they got from people and how it affected them. So if you want to go deeper into the story, I definitely recommend watching this. And of course, it does cover what happened to Travis. When I knew that I wanted to cover this story on Pretty Scary, I did go and watch this film because I'd never seen it before. And as always, I would recommend make sure you're in the dark. If possible, make sure you're alone and really go in with an open mind. Go in believing. All right, I think that is quite enough time spent on the darker side of things for now. But don't forget, if you've got a story that you want me to look into, something strange, unsettling, or just a little bit off, please send it my way. Email me boo@prettyscary.com and follow along on socials at prettyscarypod. And if all that's already slipped your mind, don't worry, it's all in the description of the podcast. Until next time.
Pretty scary.